All righty, well, welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we're going to be talking with Ruben Nilsson with Caves of Faribault. And of course, we're also going to be tasting some really fun cheeses. So we also have a guest that will be joining us, and that will be Erin, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruben.
Hi, thank you. I'm Ruben Nilsson. I'm the head cheesemaker and the general manager here at Caves of Faribault. We're part of Prairie Farms Dairy, a farmer-owned dairy co-op.
Hi guys. Oh, I'm Erin. I am the national sales person for the Caves of Faribault. So if you ever have bought our cheese or ask questions about our cheese or want to buy cheese, you will talk to me or have talked to me. So
Yeah, and I've been with the Caves since 2006. Started out in the make room and the lab. So over my years, I've been quality manager, production manager, and now for the past year, I've been the general manager of Caves of Faribault.
But yeah, so I've been with the Caves for about a year. It just hit a year in April. But I have been in cheese for somewhere between like 12, 13-ish years. I started my career as a cheesemonger at Whole Foods. Was there for about 10 years. And then I bounced into a bigger buyer role in San Francisco. And then I started working at a creamery out on the East Coast, as well as counterculture events with with an amazing group of ladies. And then I found my way back to the Midwest, and now I'm in Minneapolis with the Caves.
I first met Jeff, I think, around 2008 or 2009, somewhere right around there on a project, and really fell in love with the quality of the cheeses and the dedication of everybody, and just how everybody just works so hard to make such a great product. So I've always I had a great admiration for you guys and for Jeff and yourself. So let's go ahead and start off with our first cheese, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So Erin, do you want to take over on this?
Yeah, I can definitely take over on this. So you guys should all have the cheese in front of you. I put the sides in order of kind of my ideal best way to taste them, just so one doesn't overpower the rest. But if you've already started digging in and choosing your own adventure, that's totally fine. Just have a little something as a palate cleanser. So yeah, so the first cheeses are St. Mary's Gouda. As Ruben said, this is our grass-fed. This is our grass-fed Gouda. So this one's aged for a minimum of 9 months. One thing that's cool about the Caves and all the employees is that everyone is incredibly skilled there. So when it comes to aging, we don't age at a hard date. We kind of pull at the flavor profile that we're looking for. So, depending on the wheel of St. Mary's, it could be 9 months, it could be 11 months. As milk kind of changes, even with grass-fed milk, from spring to late summer, sometimes you need to age cheese longer or shorter. But yeah, so that's the St. Mary's. So that one's one of my favorite ones.
So you can see how beautiful this cheese is. You can really see that there's how beautiful the color is, the textures of this particular cheese. I'm a huge fan of Goudas, and I think that when you have one like this that has this texture, crumbability, is really exceptional.
The one thing I love about the St. Mary's is it gets that kind of fatty, pliable consistency, but there are still little bits of tyrosine crystals in it, which is kind of amazing because usually when you think of tyrosine crystals, you think of like the harder Goudas, and this was one of the first times in a more semi-soft Gouda I ever saw that. Just from the kind of ones that I've sold throughout the years. And I always love sampling St. Mary's people because from afar you think it's just going to be kind of like this very mild lactic Gouda, but because of the milk and because of the aging, you get kind of like grass, herbal, wildflower notes from the milk, but then you still get those kind of caramel and toffee on the finish. And I'd say out of any of the cheeses that I taste with people, that one always seems to take people by surprise the most because they don't expect it to have so many layers of flavors as it does. So that's always a really fun one for me. That's kind of my favorite because I think it just surprises people.
Yeah, I was gonna just jump in. I noticed a Q&A question on the stream. Both the St. Mary's and the Jeff Select do come from the same Wisconsin cheesemaker. We've collaborated with them since 2008. So it's Maple Leaf Cheesemakers in Monroe, and their head cheesemaker Jeff Weidman is very good friends with our founder Jeff Jurek, and that may be a little bit of foreshadowing to one of the other cheeses we will taste. But the St. Mary's is grass-fed cow's milk that comes from one of our co-op members and then is made at Maple Leaf.
The milk with this one and the Jeff Select, though they are both Wisconsin milks being made, and the cheese is made in Wisconsin. So yeah, so this is, like I said, this one's kind of it's one of my favorites to just bring everywhere because I think it's super friendly. But you still get a lot of depth. You can put it on a cheese plate and it'll stand up to everything on it. But it's approachable. It doesn't scare anyone off. No one sees it and gets a little frightened, or no one smells it from afar and is kind of turned off. So it's kind of like this lovely harmony between adventurous yet approachable. And I love that about that cheese.
This has got a nice, very rich butter flavor, but what's really surprising for it not being an extra aged Gouda is that this has a lot of maple, caramel, all those flavors that you normally expect from a very hard or aged or extremely aged, but this has got all those flavors. It's got some nice triosine crystallization, some amino acids to it. And, with this particular cheese, I really favor a dark lager, a short beer. And so that's what I grabbed, a little 610 mischievous black lager. Just happens to be a collaborative with myself and Chris Johnson, and absolutely magnificent together, and I'm kind of simple when it comes to pairings. I think that instead of going with a really salty version, a little sweet cracker, this is an Effie's pecan nut cake, and a little bit of that sweetness goes here, and it has kind of like a pie-ish with the crispiness here.
It was a good call on the Schwartz beer. I do classes with local breweries, and I think that was one of my favorite pairs at St. Mary's. I think it highlights the sweetness, and it pulls it to the forefront of the cheese, which is really nice. I also don't mind a saison with it. I'm partial to saisons. Kind of brings out the herbaceousness and the grassiness. And they tend to be a little bit lighter and effervescent. So sometimes I like that because I find St. Mary's to be super rich and fatty on the palate. So I like to have something that kind of acts like a toothbrush and helps me reset and kind of scrub, act as like a scrub on my tongue to reset. And I've recently I've been trying to think of all my dear loved ones that maybe are partial to alcoholic pairings, and so I've been doing a lot of nice green tea iced teas with it. Those tend to be a little bit more earthy and grassy too. And I really like sencha tea with it, with a little squeeze of lemon. And with it being iced rather than hot, I've been really digging that with the fatty consistency.
Yeah, this is such an easy to snack on cheese. There's, like you said, there's nothing to be afraid of on this particular cheese. It doesn't have anything that's out of the ordinary. It's just lovely, and it has that sweetness. You know, you get so much out of this particular cheese. It's just amazing. Fruit works really well with it because it's got that maple caramel. So strawberries or raspberries would be really good, and you know that. And of course, you know, like I said, a little sweet cracker or nut bread would be magnificent with it. A little desserty though, you know, but a good afternoon snack with a lager, a black lager works well.
Turn up a dessert. Sometimes I add that or the Jeffs. We'll talk about next to any kind of like pie crust or something like that, just because they are kind of caramelly and sweet.
Yeah, and this came up at a class that you and I did back in, was it January? St. Mary's is my favorite for tuna melts.
Oh, that's right. That's totally right. Yeah. How about that? I find too, St. Mary's, it's one of those, you know, you've been in the cheese industry for a while, you get to know a lot of people who've also been in the cheese industry for a while. And like I said, not only with customers, but everyone is always so surprised how the depth of flavor just kind of keeps going and going and going in every bite. St. Mary's is a super special cheese.
Yeah, I like that it's not overpowering, but there's a lot of depth to the flavor of it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's step on over to our next cheese, and we're going to stay in with the Goudas.
Yeah, so if you guys have it in front of you, I have a little piece, so just make sure you kind of like check out the rind. Sorry, I'm so not good at showing things at a camera on Zoom yet. But so I didn't have any St. Mary's. I think I ate it all. So now I have the cheeses in front of me. Jeff's is our plus 12 age Gouda, and with this one, there's actually a natural rind on it, which I love because it really kind of lets Jeff select shine among all the different Goudas that there are out there, since there are so many available. So you get kind of that sweet toffee caramel flavor to it, and you get those crunchy bits in it, those tyrosine crystals that everybody loves and asks for. But then as you get closer to the rind, you kind of get this like earthy, damp, kind of dank flavor, which I love because that right there is the terroir of our cave, right? So when you're eating the rind, that's the terroir. That is the taste of the caves of Faribault. So I love this cheese. This one is a super easy cheese to fall in love with. Just from the looks of it, you know, it's pretty much a stunner on a cheese plate. If you ever really want to make a cheese plate to impress your family and your friends, throw a piece of Jeff's on, you'll get a bunch of compliments. But the flavor is there too. But what I also love about Jeff's is, even though it is aged and even though you're going to get a lot more of those tyrosine crystals, with all of our cheese, it is super rich on the palate. Where sometimes a lot of harder aged Goudas, they don't kind of, the fat doesn't kind of sit and fall and rest on your tongue as much, you know, where that Jeff's, it just lingers.
This is Cigar City. It's a local brewery, and this is Highlight. like the game highlight. And, you know, with it has all that sweetness, all that caramel, all that very, very tight richness to it. And, you know, a lot of times it becomes so overwhelming and overpowering with all that richness that you kind of need something to cut it down a little bit to kind of balance it out. Not because it has to, but if you have any expectation of eating this entire piece by yourself, you're going to need some help. Not by another person, but what helps is you know, getting a nice little balance in the flavors, and that's what this IPA is designed to do. Citrus, so it adds a little bit of cleaning to it. It's got a little bit of pine, but it just works beautifully with that maple and caramel. Have you had an IPA with this before?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite pairings with it, and I like it because I think generally when people think IPAs, they think cloth-bound cheddar, right? Because they think like strength, and the cloth-bound cheddar does have that earthiness that kind of plays off the hops, right? Where because of the natural rind on the Jeffs, I think it's like a great stub-in for a cloth-bound cheddar, and it's like this delightful surprise when you do a pairing class because people are kind of assuming we're going to use our cheddar. Oh, they're going to do an IPA, it's going to be the Finney cheddar. Where I'm always like, no, you got to do it with the Jeff Select. Other favorites, I do like a dry cider with it, but that's, you know, apples, Gouda, no brainer. And then one of my favorites too is I've recently really gotten into nice sparkling Lambruscos. And I do like that with the Jeff Select as well. Those are typically, I think Lambruscos a lot go with like a Parmigiano Reggiano, Piave, or something like that. And being that the Jeff's has such a similar, you know, because it's aged, it does give you more of that similar consistency. That's kind of our cheese I like to just kind of snack on with Lambrusco.
You know, when I was thinking about a charcuterie, and I wanted something that would help it bring out more of the sweetness. And so I went with a mondadella. You know, it's a very, very simple version, but it does a great way of being able to really bring out more of the butter.
Mm-hmm. That sounds delicious. I'm gonna have to try that. I haven't tried that yet. I'm a big fan of grating Jeff's Select. My number one snack is fresh pop popcorn, and I like to grate that on top, and it gives it kind of with a little bit of butter, and it kind of gives it that salty sweet, half of the Chicago mix style, and that's my kind of go-to. Just, you know, to kind of change up cheese pairings a little. Sometimes I'm such a sucker for, you know, salty snacks like charcuterie, Castelvetranos, Marcona almonds, and things like that. That sometimes I'm like, you got to do something different. So I've started doing it over popcorn.
That sounds magnificent. You know, a lot of times, you know, for us, we are, you know, creating cheese boards just by grabbing stuff out of the pantry or the refrigerator. This, you know, I actually didn't go out and buy anything. I had some of these things sitting around, and I was digging through, thinking what would be really great. So, you know, having that stuff that, you know, you just make it, you know, kind of like creating your own recipes and stuff. There's also a cracker that I like to have with it. And this is a brewer's cracker. They use spent grain, and this is sea salt. So having some sea salt into this, sea salt, the caramel, it is, it's really, really good as well. And that takes us, instead of being so sweet, we get that saltiness, and then you really need that IPA.
That's delicious. Now I want Brewers crackers with my Jeff Select, and I would love an IPA. That's gonna be my weekend snack.
Ruben?
Yeah, you should do this for a living, Michael. I think you've really got a knack. I guess the only thing I would have to add to that maybe would be eggs, like a Frico egg. You know, kind of grate the Jeff Select, let it melt in your pan, and kind of start to get crispy. Then your fried egg over the top of that, and do like a sunny side up Frico egg with Jeff Select.
Yeah.
I feel that there's a lot of Jeff Selects in my Memorial Day weekend future.
Let's look at going over to our next, which is moving us into the blues.
So, first one I have here is the AmaGorg. And so, yep, got it. So this one is aged 90 days. You know, like Ruben said, this is our heat-treated blue. We're going to be using, again, milk from the one farm on our co-op, so the Holstein Brown Swiss Jersey combo. And I love this blue cheese, or I should say Gorgonzola cheese. So this one's a little sweeter, kind of less acidic than our kind of like OG Ama Blue that the Caves Faribault makes. It's a little bit sharper in flavor, but kind of like Ruben said, so one thing I find fascinating about our blues is how clean the finish is. And when I was just a monger, I sold the Caves of Faribault cheese, but I'd never been there. I really probably didn't study up as much as I should have about it years ago. But one thing that always stood out to me is that clean finish. And that's because of that sandstone that Ruben was talking about earlier. And kind of the coolest thing that I realized and noticed when I first went into the caves, the first time I was ever there, is if any of you guys have ever been to Cheese Cave, the first thing that kind of happens when you walk in is ammonia kind of smacks you in the face. But in Faribault, you smell the blue. Like, it's incredible how it's just the aroma of blue cheese versus ammonia. And I think because of that, it gives all of our blues super clean finishes. The other thing I really like about this cheese is the mouthfeel. I find it most kind of apparent in our Gorgonzola is in the actual veining. So if you kind of like take your cheese and you break it apart kind of right on one of the blue veins, you'll notice it's a little grittier right there in texture. And that's one of my favorite differences in the Gorg versus our other blues, is that difference in texture. This one is also, I find, to be kind of very creamy and decadent and lush.
Oh, I was gonna actually go a little bit into kind of the difference between our Gorgonzola and our blue. So that kind of I don't know what you kind of described as the more decadent texture, kind of that little heavier, thicker, denser texture is one of the hallmarks of the way we make the Gorgonzola style versus the St. Pete's, which it's an American rineless blue cheese style. One of the things that Jeff always instilled in all us cheesemakers was that you need to be able to taste the milk. No matter what flavors you're building during the make or during your aging, cheese is about the milk. You know, that's the famous phrase that cheese is milk's leap towards immortality. And if that doesn't come through, you're not doing justice to the farm and to the cows and to the process. So that is definitely something we're trying to respect and honor.
I will say too, and I think it was Jeff who told me this story, and this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just gonna say it. It's only being recorded, so it's so. But from what Jeff told me, you know, Jeff wanted, just like Jeff has the utmost respect for the milk, he has respect for kind of all cheeses and the flavor that they're trying to bring out. And he had told me that when he was first developing this Gorgonzola style, that he had someone bring it back different gorgonzolas from Italy.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
accurate. So my understanding, I wasn't around in the industry at the time, in the late 80s through the mid to late 90s, there was a lot of consolidation and blue cheese specifically within the consolidation happening in the American dairy industry. And it was harder to find different characteristics to blue cheese. Like, they were becoming a lot more the same, fewer plants, so all the cheese starts to taste the same. So a lot of chefs were drawn towards Italian Gorgonzola to give a little extra character or a little something different than what they could find in a domestic blue cheese. So when developing it, she was a flight attendant on international route who would go to Italy regularly, and she brought back gorgonzolas from different regions that producing it, and then they focused on one region, and so she brought back different gorgonzolas from that specific area of the gorgonzola producing region to figure out what they wanted to reverse engineer to the way we make cheese here.
I just thought that was cool because it shows that even though it's kind of this new world American blue maker, there's so much respect for the old world and how they make cheese. And I think that speaks very highly of cheesemakers when they have that, because I mean, American cheese is new world cheese, right? So and unless you're doing an American original, you're kind of paying this nice homage to who's done it before you. And I just thought that was really cool. And I think it just showed too that all the cheese recipes weren't kind of made lightly. There's thought and consideration that went into all of these cheeses.
I have to say that the bluing on here is just so beautiful. It is just beautiful chunks of the bluing. And my favorite part about Gorgonzola is having that creaminess, that real simple butter and mushroom with a little bit of saltiness to it.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things with this cheese is I really like blue and chocolate. So I have these little chocolate covered chocolate and espresso covered almonds that, again, just like you said, I didn't buy anything particular for this pairing. An hour ago, I opened my cupboard, saw what I had. I also really like blue and coffee. I think those flavors, I think a lot of people at first are like, blue and coffee, that sounds gnarly. But I think once they try it, and they open up their eyes to like, maybe you could have a few other things. I think pairings, it's all experimental, right? Got to try it with what you have. And sometimes you find something super cool, and sometimes you drink a lot of water right after a pairing because it didn't maybe go as well as you had hoped, right?
Well, I paired this up with a porter, and this is from 610 Brewing here in Tampa, and a really wonderful, malty, sweet little porter. Blends in really well. And for the pairing, I decided that I would go with the Booze Time Cherries. Cherry and porter and blue cheese is absolutely just an amazing combination. And this is taste elevated, and they do a little spiciness in it. I'm not talking about heat. I'm talking about sweet spices with, of course, a little booze in there.
Nice. That sounds delicious. I just have some plain old raspberry jam. Putting my jam to shame.
Yeah, there's a local jelly maker that does like a garlic pepper jelly that I think goes really well. And then I also do like kind of an anti-pairing and just fresh baguette and butter.
Yeah,
I like a blue with a maple butter.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because, you know, more fat.
Yeah.
Fat is the right way to go.
I have to say that adding a little bit of an Effie's nut cake to it also takes it into that next level with the porter.
Yeah. I mean, those Effies, I feel like they can't do anything wrong.
Mm.
I feel like every time yeah. It's one of those things I used to warn people when I worked behind the counter. I'd be like, you're going to buy these, but like, there's not going to be any left over. Whether it's you or 10 people, like that box will be gone. So,
But you know, it's
any
funny
room
is
for
that
leftovers.
when they ship it into the stores, they have a little pack that's broken pieces to be able to sample, and the deli managers are the first ones to consume them.
Oh yeah, I was like, I don't know if I've ever sampled those. Sorry, Effies. I know that.
That's not a
I thought
gift
those are for
for
us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also like as a worker, it is your job to know what you're selling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to taste them, right? And pair them.
Yeah. So it's such a magnificent, easy to eat blue. I say this every single time is that I have a lot of people that in my classes that say, oh, I tried blue, I didn't like it, and that's pretty much the way they go. So I tell them, all right, well, this would be like if you walked into the produce department and you picked up a vegetable, you took a bite of it and say, I don't like vegetables, just because it's a vegetable, not because they're different. And blues are so radically different that, you know, you got to give them a chance. And this is an easy entry to blues. It's so creamy. It's got more butter than anything else. It's got a little sour cream with that mushroom and a little bit of saltiness, and it literally melts in your mouth.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah, I
you
know.
had a
gotta
guess.
Pause for the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
know.
it's every Zoom, right?
Well, yeah, he's better today, but if I leave him outside, that's all he does is bark. So, he's
Yep.
pretty good. All right, so how about we look at going to our next cheese, the St. Pete Select.
So the St. Pete's is kind of our premium, kind of super premium cheese. This is the oldest aged one that we kind of always have available. So this one is actually goes through 4 grading steps, and then at the caves, there's a certain group of people that kind of taste through all the batches, who kind of know like what flavors we're looking for, kind of keep aging to make something a St. Pete's versus pulling it at 75 days like an AmaBlue. So it kind of, the team kind of hand selects these wheels during tastings. So like the AmaBlue and the AmaGorg, it's heat treated, same milk, same farm, and this flavor profile. So Jeff does love to say this, so I added it in. You know, it was called Complex, Complicated, and Delightfully Intimate by one of his good friends, Deborah Dickerson, who, if you don't know of her, she is like the godmother of everyone in cheese, and a lovely woman. But I love the St. Pete's. This is kind of my go-to blue. This cheese is actually, when one of my dear friends told me about this job opening, I was like, oh, they make the St. Pete's. It's about, you know, one of my top couple blues. So it's the cheese that actually made me apply for my job. It's super creamy, but you still get these like tangy, sharp, piquant kind of flavors that are a hallmark of an American blue, but it also still has that super clean finish. And I think what's important about this cheese is, even though it is going to be stronger and sharper than the AmaBlue or the AmaGorg, nothing we make, kind of like you said, Michael, when you were talking about how all the blues are different, right? So for someone to make such a blanket statement like, I don't like blues. I've had people who say they don't like blues who fall in love with even the peats. And I think because even though it is sharper and even though there is more of that kind of peppery flavor to it, just the way it kind of cleans up well, it's more approachable. And I love this blue because it also I always say it like plays well with others. You know, put it on a cheese board, and even though it's a stronger blue, you can kind of dip back into kind of medium flavor cheeses, and it's totally not going to wreck your palate. But you cook with it, and it's not going to overpower all the other flavors you're cooking with. The worst is when I plan to cook with a blue, and I sit there and chop onions and garlic and mince things and dice things and all this, and then I grab a super strong blue and I throw it in, and all that work was for nothing. Taste is the blue. Where this kind of highlights and accentuates other flavors, which is what I love about the St. Pete's.
One of my favorites, and this is actually the cheese that was introduced to me by Jeff as the first blue cheese that he thought I should have. And I really adore this. I think that this is a beautiful blue, and it is like what you said. You know, it's not overly powering. It's not going to take over. It's just going to be a really nice experience between these. And I'm pairing this up with dry cider.
Nice.
And this is Gypsy Circus Cider Company out of Tennessee. And they make some amazing, they're award-winning. They do a bunch of stuff. But the cider, the sweets, a little bit of sweetness here with the blue cheese. Oh.
Yeah, that blue with like sweet kind of tart flavors is amazing.
Mm.
Yeah,
You know,
I've also done like black IPAs or like a black lager, something that's lighter bodied but still has that nice toastiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I don't do them as often anymore. I think I dove a little deep into the sour category of beer and needed to kind of pull back for a little bit, but I do like a blue and more of like a fruit forward sour too at times.
Yeah. Well, you know what you got to have is you got to have a little bit of the honey, you know, with this, because that little bit of saltiness, the honey, and then the apple together. You could actually put a slice of apple underneath this, and this would be absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, I love doing buckwheat honey with the St. Pete's. Because I mean, buckwheat, you the I don't know, the grain kind of note comes through in the honey fairly strongly, so it's a little more of a subdued sweetness, but I think it pairs really well.
Nice.
You know, there's just enough saltiness in here to really, I guess it'd be like a little bit of a salted apple, but the sweetness, the saltiness, and you know, I think that some of the things that people find difficult in blues are the extreme in the sour cream or tanginess, in the extreme saltiness, or the extreme earthiness. This has a little earthiness. It has some saltiness to it. It has some sour cream. But most important, it has that amazing butter. And that with the butter and, you know, that is just magnificent.
I do the Velvet Bees honey butter with that a lot, because again, I need more fat for my palate. So we have a local company out here called Velvet Bees, and they just do this like phenomenal honey butter, and that with the St. Pete's, you know, again, like you said, Michael, that salty sweet, you know, it's an unbeatable combo.
Yeah, I was doing a pairing with you a couple of years back, and you had like a cocoa nib shortbread. So for like a little cheese event here in Minnesota, I took those cocoa nib shortbreads with St. Pete's, and then my wife had made some blood orange marmalade that had some vanilla bean and chili flakes in it. And so, I mean, it was huge flavors all over the place, but I think the St. Pete's held up to it, like held its own, and it was a very flavorful but balanced bite.
You know, for honeys, you know, like you said, there's a tremendous amount of different ones out there. You know, take the time and really look. Savannah Bee Honey does a great job. They're like at 80% pollen count, so they have a tremendous amount. Taste Elevated out of Texas does a tremendous amount of fun stuff. Effie's, you know, they do great corn cakes and rye cakes and pecan cakes. And so you can really get a nice variation. And, you know, especially with the blues, they lend themselves surprisingly, not just for snacking and that, but also, you know, adding a little bit of them into a macaroni and cheese. You know, it adds a little bit of the tanginess that you get through that. And also, I use it, I create my own blue dressing. And one of the things about doing your own blue is that when you buy a bottle of blue, you got to like that. You got to go with, okay, yeah, they make the flavors that I really like. But with making your own blue, you can have it a little more blue, a little less blue, a little more tangy, a little less tangy. So, you know, that's really one of the cool things about that. You know, wedge salad is kind of like a standard at my house. And so this St. Pete's Blue is probably my #1 favorite for blue cheese dressing.
I was gonna say blue cheese balls. I mean, they're kind of, they're retro, right? Cream cheese, blue cheese, and then, you know, a little chopped celery, maybe some chopped nuts on the surface of it. Yeah, a little Tabasco and Worcestershire in there for some zing, and yeah.
When Michael was saying throw a little into mac and cheese for like a little zing, I thought about the other day, one of my girlfriends, she put out a book of all fondues. One of them it was cheddar and cheddar and Gouda. All you did was sprinkle on top a couple ounces of blue, but then you stirred it all in, and it just gave it this tang. And I of course used so.
Oh, and my top secret pairing is Jeff Select and St. Pete Select. Just take a little piece of Jeff Select and then a little bit of St. Pete's on top, and eat them together.
Yeah. So here we are. I really greatly appreciate you guys coming out today and playing. It's been, you know, magnificent. The cheeses, thank you so much for sharing them. It is a little after 5, and I have to promise that I'm going to be moving this over to my den and enjoying this for, this might be my dinner tonight. I don't know, but it's really great, and I want to thank you. I want to thank both of you for coming out.
Well, thank you for hosting us.
You're very welcome.
Well, it's been a lot of fun.
You know, for everybody that attended, thank you very much for being here with us. And next week, our final week of the American Cheese Month, and we will wrap that up with 4 amazing cheesemakers as well. And remember that when you buy a piece of cheese, you are supporting families, farm families, and cheese-making families. So it's a big area that you're helping with. So I greatly appreciate that. We appreciate it. And we thank you so much for being able to come out and play. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.